She didn't blink when the gun touched her forehead. While everyone else hit the floor, she stood there calm, unreadable, and the Mafia boss in the corner booth stopped pretending to sip his whiskey. Then she moved, and in 3 seconds the robber was on the ground. And that's when Christopher Santiago decided she wasn't just a waitress, she was an opportunity. If this story pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss what's ahead. I've got another unforgettable story coming tomorrow. And while you're here, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing people tuned in from all over the world. Okay, let's get back into it. The neon signs outside cast shifting patterns of red and blue across the rain-streaked windows of the bar. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of night when the city felt empty even when it wasn't, when the rain turned everything into a watercolor of reflections and shadows. Sabrina adjusted the strap of her apron, wiping condensation from the polished wood of the bar top. She was 28, with dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. There was something in her posture, in the controlled economy of her movements, that suggested military precision hidden beneath service industry camouflage. Her white blouse was crisp despite the late hour, her black skirt professional. She'd been working at this bar for 18 months. It paid enough to cover her studio apartment in the industrial district and, more importantly, it asked no questions. There were only 4 other people in the bar. Near the rain-washed windows, a young couple sat hunched together, the woman's head on her companion's shoulder. At a table closer to the center, another woman sat alone, staring into her drink. And in the back corner booth, the one with cracked leather and a view of both exits, sat a man who hadn't touched his whiskey in 20 minutes. Sabrina had noticed Christopher Santiago the moment he'd walked through the door. Black suit jacket left unbuttoned, no tie, dark hair slicked back from a face that could have been handsome if it wasn't so carefully blank. Tattooed hands wrapped around a glass he never actually drank from. He didn't look at her directly, but she could feel his awareness like static electricity before a storm. He came here twice a week, always the same booth, always alone, always watching everything. She'd learned not to stare back. The door slammed open at 11:52 p.m. Rain swept inside on a gust of cold air. A figure in a black hoodie and ski mask burst through, handgun raised, voice cutting through the low hum of background music. "Everybody down, now!" The couple at the window dropped immediately, ducking beneath their table. The woman sitting alone let out a strangled gasp and slid from her chair, hands covering her head. Christopher Santiago didn't move. His posture shifted almost imperceptibly, shoulders lowering slightly, eyes tracking the gunman's movements with the focused attention of a predator assessing threats. Not afraid, calculating. And Sabrina remained exactly where she was behind the bar, one hand still resting on the polished wood, her expression as neutral, as if someone had asked her for a menu. The masked man's gun swung toward her. "You! Open the register! Move!" She didn't. The robber crossed the space between them in 3 aggressive strides, his boots squeaking on the wet floor. He pressed the barrel of the pistol directly against her forehead, close enough that she could smell cigarettes and nervous sweat on his clothes. "I said move." Sabrina's eyes didn't even flicker toward the weapon. Her breathing remained steady, unhurried. Her hands stayed loose at her sides. Behind her, the neon signs painted her white blouse in alternating shades of red and blue. The silence stretched. 3 seconds. 5. 10. From the corner booth, Christopher Santiago slowly sat up straighter, his full attention now locked on the scene unfolding before him. The robber's hand was shaking now, the gun trembling against Sabrina's skin. "What's wrong with you? Are you crazy?" She still didn't respond, didn't blink, just looked at him with those dark, unreadable eyes. The gunman's panic was escalating, his breathing grew ragged. When his attention shifted just for a heartbeat toward Christopher, his voice rising in pitch. "You, in the booth, get down." Christopher didn't respond. He simply watched, his tattooed hands still wrapped around his untouched whiskey, his expression revealing nothing. And that's when Sabrina moved. Her right hand shot up, fingers closing around the robber's wrist with surgical precision. She twisted outward, using his own momentum against him as he instinctively tried to pull back. The gun jerked away from her face. In the same fluid motion, she stepped inside his reach, her left hand coming up to strike his elbow joint. His grip failed. The weapon clattered to the bar top. Before he could process what was happening, she had pivoted behind him, sweeping his legs. He hit the floor hard, the air exploding from his lungs. She stepped back immediately, her movements controlled and economical, and kicked the pistol across the floor where it skidded to a stop near the center of the room. The entire sequence had taken less than 3 seconds. The bar fell silent except for the robber's gasping breaths and the steady drumming of rain against glass. Christopher Santiago stood slowly, his considerable height unfolding from the booth. He walked toward the fallen weapon with measured steps, his expensive shoes clicking on the hardwood. He bent, picked up the gun with his tattooed hands, and ejected the magazine with practiced efficiency before setting it on a nearby table, well out of reach. Then he turned to look at Sabrina. She stood behind the bar, her ponytail slightly loosened, her white blouse still pristine. Her chest rose and fell with normal, controlled breaths, not the gasping panic of someone who'd just been held at gunpoint, not even the elevated breathing of someone who'd just been in a fight. Just calm, absolute calm. "Who are you?" Christopher asked quietly. Before she could answer, the robber scrambled to his feet and bolted for the door, stumbling into the rain-soaked night. Neither of them moved to stop him. The couple emerged from beneath their table. The woman who'd been sitting alone was already dialing 911 with shaking hands, but Christopher Santiago didn't look away from Sabrina Sales. And Sabrina, for the first time that night, allowed the faintest shadow of something not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement to touch the corner of her mouth. "Just a waitress," she said. Christopher's eyes narrowed slightly, because they both knew that was a lie. The police arrived 12 minutes later, their red and blue lights adding to the neon chaos already painting the rain-soaked windows. 2 uniformed officers took statements from the couple, who couldn't stop talking about how the waitress had just destroyed that guy. The woman who'd been drinking alone had already left, sliding out during the confusion, unwilling to be caught up in paperwork. Sabrina answered the officers' questions with the same calm precision she'd shown during the robbery itself. Yes, she'd felt threatened. No, she didn't know the assailant. Yes, she'd acted in self-defense. Her voice was steady, professional, almost bored. She gave them her information, declined the offer of a victim advocate, and assured them she was fine. Christopher Santiago had retreated to his booth during the police interview, but his eyes never left her. When the officers finally departed with promises to follow up, the couple gathered their things and hurried out into the night, leaving only the 2 of them in the bar. Sabrina returned to wiping down the counter, her movements resuming their earlier rhythm as if nothing had happened. "We're closed," she said without looking up. "I haven't finished my drink." Christopher's voice carried from the back booth, low and measured. "You haven't started it." A pause. Then, observant. She did look up then, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. In the shifting neon light, his face was all sharp angles and shadows, his dark eyes intelligent and dangerous. The tattoos on his hands extended up his forearms. She could see the edges of intricate designs disappearing beneath his rolled sleeves. "You should go," she said. Instead, he stood and walked to the bar, settling onto one of the stools directly across from her. Up close, she could see the details the distance had hidden: the small scar above his left eyebrow, the silver ring on his right hand, the way his suit jacket fit perfectly across his shoulders. This was a man who understood the power of presentation. He pushed his untouched whiskey across the polished wood toward her. "Drink with me. I'm working." "No, you're avoiding." His eyes studied her face with unsettling focus. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Sabrina set down her rag and crossed her arms. She knew who Christopher Santiago was. Everyone in this part of the city did. You didn't run legitimate businesses and carry yourself like a loaded weapon. You didn't command that kind of silent authority without a reputation preceding you. "Self-defense classes," she said flatly. "That wasn't self-defense." He leaned forward slightly. "That was tactical disarmament, military technique, and you assessed threat angles before he even finished coming through the door. I watched you position yourself." She held his gaze, neither confirming nor denying. "Your father," Christopher continued, his voice dropping lower. "Was he military?" The question landed like a physical blow, though her expression didn't change. But Christopher saw it anyway, the microscopic tightening around her eyes, the half-second delay before she responded. "What do you want, Mr. Santiago?" So she knew his name. "Interesting." "To understand what I just witnessed," he said simply, "because women who work as waitresses in waterfront bars don't usually have the training to disarm armed assailants without breaking a sweat." Sabrina reached for the whiskey he'd pushed toward her. She took a small sip, feeling the burn, using the moment to decide how much truth to give him. When she set the glass down, her decision was made. "My father was a military officer. Later, he trained security forces. I grew up learning firearms, tactical awareness, hand-to-hand combat. Her voice remained steady, matter of fact. He believed everyone should know how to protect themselves, especially his daughter. Past tense, Christopher noted. Was. He died 4 years ago. No emotion in her voice, but something flickered behind her eyes. Heart attack, and you left that life. I left that life, she confirmed. I wanted something different, something quiet. Christopher glanced around the bar, the worn booths, the flickering neon, the lingering smell of spilled beer and rain-soaked clothing. This is quiet? This is invisible, she corrected. Nobody looks at a waitress. Nobody asks questions. Nobody expects anything except service and a smile. But the skills never leave you. No, she met his eyes again. They don't. They sat in silence for a moment. The only sounds the rain against the windows and the hum of the beer coolers behind the bar. Christopher Santiago was studying her the way someone might study a complex equation, trying to understand how all the pieces fit together. That robbery wasn't random, he said finally. Sabrina's expression didn't change, but her attention sharpened. What do you mean? I mean, this bar sits on neutral ground. 3 blocks from my territory, 2 blocks from the Russians, 4 blocks from the Irish. Nobody touches neutral ground without a reason. He turned the whiskey glass in slow circles on the polished wood. Someone wanted to see how this place would respond, how I would respond. You think it was a test? I know it was. His voice carried absolute certainty. Someone is probing my territory. Small hits, supply route interceptions, missing shipments. This was another probe, see if I'd intervene, see if I'd expose my presence here. Sabrina processed this information with the analytical mind her father had trained. You come here because it's neutral, a place to think without being watched by your own people. Smart, Christopher acknowledged. But now someone knows I frequent this location. They'll try again. Different approach, but they'll try. That's not my problem. It became your problem the moment you disarmed that man. Christopher leaned back on the stool, his posture relaxed but his eyes intense. Because whoever sent him will have heard what happened by now, and they'll wonder the same thing I did. Who are you, really? The weight of his words settled between them. Sabrina felt the careful anonymity she'd built over 18 months beginning to crack. She'd been invisible, safe, and in less than 3 seconds of action, she'd made herself visible to exactly the kind of people she'd been avoiding. I need someone who sees what others miss, Christopher said quietly. Someone who can analyze patterns, identify threats, someone with tactical training and the discipline not to panic under pressure. I'm not for hire. Everyone's for hire. It's just a matter of price. Sabrina shook her head, pushing the whiskey glass back toward him. I left that world, Mr. Santiago. I'm not going back. Christopher stood, smoothing his suit jacket. He pulled out a business card plain black with only a phone number embossed in silver and placed it on the bar between them. You were never out of it, he said softly. You just stopped looking. He walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the empty bar. At the threshold he paused, rain misting through the open doorway. The skills your father gave you, they're not a burden, Miss Sales. They're a gift. Hiding them doesn't make you safer. It just makes you a target who can't fight back. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. Sabrina stood alone in the bar, staring at the black card on the polished wood. Outside, the neon signs flickered and hummed. Inside, everything had changed. She didn't pick up the card, but she didn't throw it away either. 3 days passed before Sabrina saw Christopher Santiago again. 3 days during which she tried to convince herself that the robbery had been random, that his theories about territory probes and strategic tests were paranoia born from a life spent looking over his shoulder. 3 days of serving coffee and clearing tables and pretending that black business card wasn't burning a hole in her apartment drawer. But on Friday night, when she arrived for her shift at the bar, she knew immediately that something was wrong. The owner, Tommy Restrepo, a 60-year-old former boxer with cauliflower ears and hands like catcher's mitts, was standing behind the bar with his arms crossed, his usually jovial face tight with tension. We got a problem, he said without preamble. Sabrina set down her bag. What kind of problem? The kind where 3 of my suppliers called today to say they can't deliver anymore. No explanation. Just sorry, Tommy, can't help you. He rubbed a hand across his weathered face. And this morning, I found my delivery entrance blocked. Someone dumped construction debris in the alley. City says they didn't authorize any work. Sabrina felt something cold settle in her stomach. When did this start? Wednesday, day after the robbery. Tommy looked at her with something between concern and accusation. You think it's connected? She thought about Christopher Santiago's words. Someone is probing my territory. Thought about how the bar sat on neutral ground, how her intervention might have marked this place as more than it appeared. I don't know, she lied. But she did know. And when Christopher Santiago walked through the door at exactly 11:30 p.m., she wasn't surprised. He didn't go to his usual booth. Instead, he approached the bar directly, his expression more serious than she'd seen it. He waited until Tommy had moved to the other end to serve another customer before speaking. How many incidents? He asked quietly. You knew this would happen. I suspected. How many? Sabrina kept her voice low. Suppliers backing out. Delivery access blocked. Tommy's worried. Christopher's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It's starting. They're applying pressure to neutral locations, testing boundaries. He glanced around the bar, noting the handful of customers, the escape routes, the sight lines. They're trying to force people to choose sides, eliminate safe spaces. Who is they? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He leaned forward, his tattooed hands flat on the bar. I've lost 3 shipments in the past month. High-value cargo. The routes were secure, but somehow they knew exact timings, exact locations. Someone inside my organization is feeding information out. Sabrina processed this, her analytical mind automatically sorting through variables. You think it's one of your people? I know it is. I just don't know who. His dark eyes met hers with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she didn't. This isn't random gang violence. This is strategic, coordinated. Someone with military or tactical training is running the operation. The irony wasn't lost on her. He was describing someone like her father, someone who understood how to dismantle an organization from within, how to find weaknesses and exploit them with surgical precision. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I'm offering you a job. I already have a job. Pouring drinks for drunks who don't tip? Christopher's voice carried no judgment, only statement of fact. You're wasting your training, your intelligence, your potential. My potential for what? To become another soldier in a war I don't believe in? Sabrina's voice remained controlled, but there was steel beneath it. I've seen where that life leads. I've buried the people who lived it. Your father? My father believed in service, in protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. She straightened, putting physical distance between them. What you do isn't service. It's survival at other people's expense. Christopher was quiet for a moment, and something complicated moved across his features, not anger, but something closer to recognition. You think I don't know that? You think I chose this life because I wanted it? Everyone has choices. Not everyone. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen several times, then turned it toward her. These are the legitimate businesses in my territory. Restaurants, shops, family-owned places that have been there for generations. Sabrina looked at the list despite herself. They pay me for protection, Christopher continued, his voice low and intense. And I provide it, real protection, from the predators who would burn them down for insurance money or take them over for money laundering fronts, from the addicts who would rob them blind, from the rival organizations that don't care about collateral damage. He pocketed the phone. My father built this territory on violence. I'm trying to maintain it with strategy, with intelligence, with minimal bloodshed, but I can't do that if I'm fighting blind. So you want me to be your eyes? I want you to be what you were trained to be, an analyst, a tactician, someone who can look at patterns and see the truth underneath. He paused, letting the words land. I'm not asking you to pull a trigger. I'm asking you to use your mind. Sabrina wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him to leave and never come back, but there was something in his argument that resonated, despite her resistance. Her father had taught her that skills carried responsibility, that choosing not to use them when people needed help was its own kind of moral failure. Those businesses you protect, she said slowly. What happens to them if you lose this territory war? They get absorbed by whoever takes over. And whoever's coming after me doesn't share my philosophy about minimal violence. Christopher's expression was grim. The last neighborhood that fell to the Russians? 3 shops burned, 2 owners hospitalized, 1 family deported when immigration raids mysteriously targeted their block. The calculated cruelty of it made Sabrina's stomach turn. This was the world she'd tried to leave behind, the world where violence was currency and people were collateral damage. I can't be what you need, she said quietly. Christopher studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, placing it on the bar between them. That's the registration and insurance documents for this bar, he said. Tommy's 3 months behind on his protection payments. I've been covering them because this is neutral ground and I respect that. But if I fall, whoever takes over won't be so understanding. Sabrina stared at the envelope, understanding the unspoken threat wrapped in information. Not a threat from Christopher, a threat from the future he was warning her about. I'm not trying to manipulate you, Christopher said, his voice softer than before. I'm showing you the stakes. Tommy's not just your boss. He's a good man trying to run an honest business in a complicated world. If you won't help me for my sake, maybe you'll consider it for his. He turned to leave, but Sabrina's voice stopped him. If I did help you hypothetically, what would you need? Christopher turned back, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something like hope cross his features. Come to my office tomorrow, 2 p.m. I'll show you everything. Supply routes, incident reports, personnel files. You look at the information with fresh eyes and tell me what you see. He paused. No commitment beyond that. Just look. Sabrina knew she should refuse. Knew that stepping into his world, even for an afternoon, would be crossing a line she couldn't uncross. But she thought about Tommy's worried face, about the families who owned those shops, about her father's voice in her head. Skills carry responsibility. Just an analysis, she said finally. Nothing more. Just an analysis, Christopher agreed. After he left, Sabrina stood behind the bar, staring at the envelope he'd left behind. Outside, the neon signs painted everything in shades of red and blue. Inside, she felt the careful walls she'd built beginning to crumble. She'd left her old life behind. But her old life, it seemed, had finally caught up with her. Sabrina didn't sleep that night. She lay in her studio apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling while traffic sounds filtered through the thin walls. The space was small, barely 300 square feet, but it was hers, clean. Anonymous, safe. A Murphy bed that folded into the wall, a kitchenette with 2 burners, a bathroom where the shower leaked if you turned the pressure too high. It wasn't much, but it had been enough. Until now. She kept thinking about Christopher Santiago's words, about Tommy's face when he'd talked about losing his suppliers, about that envelope with the protection payment records inside it. Most of all, she kept thinking about her father. Colonel Raphael Sales had been a complicated man, stern but loving, demanding but fair. He'd taught her to shoot when she was 12, to analyze tactical situations by 14, to understand that violence was sometimes the only language that prevented greater violence. He'd trained security forces in 3 countries, consulted on anti-corruption initiatives, believed deeply in using force to protect the vulnerable. Skills are tools, mija, he'd told her once while they were running drills in the backyard. They're not good or evil. That's determined by what you build with them. She'd left that life after he died. Left it because watching him give everything to causes that never seemed to change anything had broken something in her. Left it because she was tired of analyzing threat matrices and violence probabilities. Tired of seeing the world as a battlefield. But lying in the dark, she couldn't deny the truth. She missed it. Missed using her mind for something more than remembering drink orders. Missed the clarity that came from solving complex problems. Missed feeling like her skills had purpose. At 6 a.m., she gave up on sleep and made coffee. The apartment's single window looked out onto a brick wall, but if she angled herself just right, she could see a sliver of sky. Dawn was breaking gray and overcast, promising more rain. Her phone sat on the counter, Christopher's business card propped against it. Just an analysis, she'd promised. One afternoon looking at his files, applying her training to his problem, then walking away. She could do that much, couldn't she? By noon, she'd almost convinced herself. She showered, dressed in dark jeans, and a simple black sweater, not trying to impress, just trying to look professional. She was pulling her hair back into its usual ponytail when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her thumb the accept button. Hello? Miss Sales? A woman's voice, professional and slightly strained. This is Carol Hendricks, from Memorial Hospital Billing Department. I'm calling about your mother's account. The words hit like cold water. Sabrina sat down heavily on the edge of her bed. I've been making payments, she said, keeping her voice steady. Yes, and we appreciate that. But the balance has reached $47,000, and we've been instructed to inform you that without a substantial payment or a new payment plan, we'll need to transfer the account to collections." Sabrina closed her eyes. Her mother, Maria Sales, had suffered a stroke 8 months ago. The first one had been manageable. The second one, 3 months later, had been devastating. She was in a long-term care facility now, caught in that cruel space between needing constant medical attention and not quite qualifying for full coverage. "How much do you need?" Sabrina asked. "We'd need at least $10,000 to prevent collection action, and that would be just to establish good faith for a new payment plan." $10,000. Sabrina had maybe $1,200 in her savings account. Her tips at the bar covered her rent and groceries with almost nothing left over. She'd been trying to save, but it was like bailing out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. I'll figure something out," Sabrina said. "I'm sorry," Carol said, and she actually sounded like she meant it. "I know these situations are difficult. You have 30 days before we process the transfer. I'll note your file that we spoke." After she hung up, Sabrina sat motionless for a long time. Through the thin walls, she could hear her neighbor's television, the upstairs couple arguing, someone's dog barking, the sounds of other people's lives continuing, while hers felt like it was collapsing. She thought about her mother, once vibrant and fierce, now trapped in a body that barely responded. Thought about the last time she'd visited, how her mother's eyes had tracked her face but couldn't form words. The doctors said there might be some recovery. Might be. With time and therapy and medication and all the things that cost money, Sabrina didn't have. The knock on her door came at 1:30 p.m. Sabrina looked through the peephole, her hand automatically going to the knife block on the counter before she recognized the delivery uniform. FedEx. She opened the door to a young man with a tablet, who had her sign for a large envelope marked for signature required. She closed the door and stared at the package. No return address, but she knew who it was from even before she opened it. Inside was cash, a lot of cash, neatly banded stacks of $100 bills. She counted it twice, not quite believing what she was seeing. $50,000. Beneath the money was a single sheet of paper with a printed breakdown her mother's medical bills, listed by date and facility, each amount precise down to the cent. At the bottom, handwritten in neat capitals, "You deserve more than survival. CS." And below that, printed, "No strings, no obligations. Just a gift from someone who understands what it's like to watch the people you love suffer because you don't have enough power to help them. The 2 p.m. offer stands if you want it. If not, the money is still yours." Sabrina's hands were shaking. She set the paper down and walked to her window, staring at her sliver of sky. Christopher Santiago had just handed her a lifeline enough to save her mother's care, enough to breathe for the first time in months. No strings, no obligations. But they both knew that wasn't true. Money like this always came with strings, even if they weren't immediately visible. He wasn't buying her services, he was too smart for something that crude. He was showing her what partnership with him could mean, what he could do for the people she loved, and it was working. Sabrina picked up her phone and dialed the number on the black business card. He answered on the second ring. "I'll come," she said. 2 p.m. The address is, "I know where you are, Mr. Santiago." She'd known since the first night he'd walked into the bar, had made it her business to know, the way her father had taught her, always understand who's in your space. "I'll be there." "Sabrina." His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "The money isn't payment for today. Whatever you decide after you see what I'm dealing with, that money is yours. Your mother needs it. That's reason enough." She wanted to believe him, wanted to think this wasn't manipulation, just kindness from someone who understood her situation. But she'd learned long ago that in this world, kindness and manipulation often wore the same face. "I'll see you at 2, she said, and ended the call. She looked at the money on her bed more than she'd seen in one place in her entire life. Enough to save her mother, enough to change everything. She thought about her father's words. "Skills are tools. They're not good or evil. That's determined by what you build with them." Maybe it was time to start building again, even if she wasn't sure yet what she was building toward. Sabrina grabbed her jacket and walked out into the gray afternoon, leaving the money on her bed and her old life one step further behind. Christopher Santiago's office wasn't what Sabrina expected. She'd anticipated something ostentatious, gold fixtures, leather furniture, the kind of aggressive displays of wealth that insecure men use to prove their importance. Instead, the building itself was understated, a 4-story brick structure in the commercial district that could have housed any legitimate business. A discreet bronze plaque by the entrance read, Santiago Holdings LLC. The woman at the reception desk, 50s, gray hair and a professional bob, reading glasses on a chain, smiled warmly as Sabrina entered. Miss Sales? Mr. Santiago is expecting you. 4th floor, last door on the right. She gestured to the elevator. Would you like coffee? Water? I'm fine, thank you. The elevator was modern, clean, silent. As it climbed, Sabrina studied her reflection in the polished doors. She looked tired, looked like someone who'd just made a decision she couldn't take back. The 4th floor was quiet, carpeted in deep charcoal gray. Framed photographs lined the walls, black and white images of the city at different eras, showing the neighborhood's evolution from industrial docks to mixed-use development. At the end of the hallway, a heavy wooden door stood slightly ajar. Sabrina knocked once. Come in. Christopher's office was surprisingly Spartan. A large desk with dual monitors, 2 leather chairs for visitors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the waterfront. The walls held maps, detailed street maps of the city with different colored pins and markers. A large whiteboard covered one wall, filled with handwritten notes and timelines. Christopher stood by the window, still in his black suit but with the jacket removed, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The tattoos on his forearms were more extensive than she'd realized, intricate geometric patterns mixed with what looked like dates and coordinates. Thank you for coming, he said, turning to face her. I haven't decided anything yet, Sabrina replied, staying near the door. I'm here to look. That's all. That's all I'm asking. He gestured to the desk where several file folders were arranged. Everything's there. Supply route schedules, incident reports going back 3 months, personnel files for my key people. I've included financial records showing the pattern of losses. Sabrina approached the desk, her analytical mind already cataloging what she saw. Christopher moved to give her space, settling into one of the visitor chairs rather than behind the desk. A deliberate choice, she noted, to put them on equal footing. She opened the first folder. Supply route manifests with handwritten notes in the margins. Dates, times, locations where interceptions occurred. She scanned quickly, her training kicking in automatically. These shipments, she said, tracing a finger down one manifest. What were you moving? Construction materials mostly. Legitimate cargo. I own 3 building supply companies. He paused. The other shipments were less legitimate. Drugs? No, I don't touch narcotics. His voice was firm. Untaxed cigarettes, gray market electronics, some pharmaceutical supplies that technically need different licensing. Not legal, but not the kind of product that destroys communities. Sabrina absorbed this, recognizing the distinction he was drawing. Her father had talked about this, the difference between organized crime that provided illegal services versus the kind that preyed on addiction and desperation. She moved to the second folder, incident reports, each one detailed, date, time, location, personnel involved, estimated losses. She began cross-referencing them with the supply schedules, her mind automatically building a timeline. The interceptions aren't random, she said after several minutes. Look at the timing. They're hitting you on routes that only happen twice a month, high-value loads but irregular schedules. I know. Christopher leaned forward. Which means whoever's feeding information outward has access to your logistics planning at least 2 weeks in advance. She pulled out the third folder, personnel files. Who schedules your shipments? My operations manager, Diego Torres. He's been with me for 6 years. Sabrina opened Torres's file, scanning quickly. Age 42, former military logistics, joined Santiago's organization after medical discharge, family man with 3 kids. On paper, he looked solid, but papers could lie. Who else sees the schedules? She asked. Torres creates them. My second-in-command approves them, and the drivers receive them 48 hours before departure. Your second-in-command, who is that? Christopher stood and walked to the whiteboard, tapping a name at the top of an organizational chart. Julian Vega. Grew up with me in this neighborhood. We built this operation together after my father died. Sabrina studied the whiteboard, seeing the hierarchy Christopher had created. It was more structured than she'd expected. Clear chains of command, separation of duties, the kind of organizational discipline that suggested military influence. Your father ran things differently, she observed. It wasn't a question. My father believed in fear and loyalty. I believe in efficiency and mutual benefit. Christopher's voice carried complicated emotions. He left me an empire built on blood. I'm trying to transform it into something sustainable, something that doesn't require constant violence to maintain. Sabrina returned to the incident reports, laying them out in chronological order. She pulled out her phone and began photographing each one, zooming in on specific details. "What are you doing?" Christopher asked. "Building a database. I can't analyze patterns without organizing the information properly," she continued photographing. "Do you have digital copies of these?" "Most of them. I can have them sent to you." "Don't," she looked up sharply. "Not through your regular systems. If there's an information leak, your digital communications are likely compromised." Christopher's expression shifted, impressed. "You're right. I should have thought of that. You're not a trained analyst. That's why you need one." She finished photographing and returned to studying the files. "These attacks, they're not trying to destroy you. Look at the losses. Significant but not crippling. They're probing your defenses, testing your response patterns. Like a military reconnaissance. Exactly like that." Sabrina moved to the map on the wall, studying the colored pins. "What do the different colors represent?" "Red is successful interceptions. Blue is my secure warehouses. Green is neutral territory. Yellow is disputed zones." She studied the pattern, her mind processing geography and timing simultaneously. After a moment, something clicked. "There," she said, pointing to a cluster of red pins. "These 3 incidents, they all happened within a 6-block radius, but on different routes that shouldn't have intersected." "Why?" Christopher came to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, subtle, expensive. He studied the map intently. "Those routes were alternates," he said slowly. "Backup plans in case the primary routes were compromised. Which means whoever's leaking information doesn't just know your plans, they know your contingencies, your backup protocols." She turned to face him. "That's not someone stealing documents, Mr. Santiago. That's someone who thinks like you, who understands your strategic decision-making." The implications settled between them. Christopher's jaw tightened. "Julian," he said quietly. "He's the only one who knows my full thinking, the only one I discuss strategy with, your best friend, since we were 12 years old." Sabrina saw the pain in his eyes, the betrayal cutting deeper than any business loss. She recognized it because she'd felt it before, when people her father trusted had turned their backs after he died. "I need to see more," she said. "Communication logs, financial records for your key personnel, surveillance footage from the interception sites if you have it." "You're staying?" She met his gaze. "I'm analyzing. That's what you paid for." "I didn't pay for anything. You gave me $50,000. I gave you a gift. This," he gestured at the files spread across his desk. "This is separate. If you help me, it's because you choose to, not because you owe me." Sabrina wanted to believe that, but she'd learned that debt came in many forms, and obligation didn't always announce itself. "I'll need a secure location to work, somewhere not connected to your regular operations." Christopher nodded slowly. "There's an apartment 2 blocks from here. Top floor. It's clean, never been used for business. I can have it ready in an hour. And I'll need access to Julian Vega's movements over the past 3 months, discreetly." "Done." Sabrina looked back at the map, at the pattern of attacks forming a noose around Christopher's territory. Someone with tactical training was dismantling his organization piece by piece, and she was the only one who could see it happening. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Skills carry responsibility." 1 week, she said. "Give me 1 week with full access to your information. I'll tell you who's betraying you and how to stop them." Christopher extended his hand. 1 week. She shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. She'd just entered the lion's den, and she had no idea if she'd walk back out. 5 days. That's how long it took Sabrina to piece together the truth. 5 days of working from the secure apartment. Christopher had provided a minimalist space with hardwood floors, a single desk facing windows that overlooked the harbor, and absolutely nothing personal to suggest anyone had ever lived there. 5 days of cross-referencing incident reports with personnel movements, analyzing financial transactions, building timeline after timeline until the pattern became undeniable. Julian Vega wasn't the traitor. He was too obvious, too perfectly positioned. Every piece of evidence that pointed to him was just slightly too convenient timestamps that aligned too neatly. Financial transfers that left clear trails. Communication records that practically screamed guilt. Someone wanted Christopher to suspect his oldest friend. The real traitor was Diego Torres, the operations manager. But he wasn't working alone. Sabrina had found the proof buried in metadata from surveillance footage. Torres consistently arriving at the office 15 minutes before he claimed to. Just long enough to access schedules before official timestamps recorded his presence. She'd traced his phone's GPS data through social media posts from his family, discovered patterns that placed him in locations he shouldn't have been, and she'd found the offshore accounts, carefully hidden but not carefully enough. But Torres was just the leak. Someone else was running the operation. Now, on the 5th night, Sabrina sat across from Christopher in his office, while rain hammered the windows. She'd spread her evidence across the desk, printed documents, highlighted financial records, a detailed map showing Torres's movements overlaid with the attack locations. Christopher studied everything in silence, his jaw tight, his tattooed hands clasped together. "Diego," he said finally. "I trusted him with my family's contact information, with my mother's medical schedule." "I'm sorry," Sabrina said, and meant it. "Who's he working for?" "I don't know yet. The money flows through 3 shell companies before it disappears, but whoever's paying him has resources. Professional resources." She pulled out her phone, showing him a photo she'd taken of Torres entering a warehouse on the eastern edge of the city. "He went here yesterday, stayed for 47 minutes. This warehouse isn't registered to any of your companies or your known competitors. It's neutral territory. Old storage facility that's been empty for months." Christopher's eyes narrowed. "Or supposedly empty. I think we should find out who's really using it." "We?" Christopher looked at her, something shifting in his expression. Sabrina realized what she'd said. Not, "you should find out." "We." She'd crossed another line without meaning to, from analyst to participant. "I've come this far," she said quietly. "I want to see it through." Christopher was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, pulling his jacket from the back of his chair. "Tomorrow night. I'll arrange a meeting at that warehouse. Tell Diego I want to discuss new security protocols. He'll alert whoever he's working with, and we'll see who shows up." "That's a trap." "Yes. It's also dangerous. If you're wrong about the location, I'm not wrong." Christopher's voice carried absolute certainty. "And I won't be going alone. I'll have 4 men with me. Good men I've known since childhood." Sabrina felt uneasy ripple through her. "If Torres suspects you know, he'll warn them. They could set their own trap. Let them try." Christopher's expression was hard now, the dangerous man beneath the strategic thinker showing through. "I'm done playing defense. Time to draw them out." The warehouse loomed against the night sky like a tombstone. 4 stories of corrugated metal and broken windows, surrounded by a chain-link fence that had been cut open in 3 places. Sabrina crouched in the passenger seat of Christopher's car, parked 2 blocks away, watching through binoculars as his black SUV pulled up to the main entrance. She wasn't supposed to be here. Christopher had been explicit. She was the analyst, not the soldier. But something in her gut had screamed warning all day, and she'd learned long ago to trust those instincts. So she'd followed at a distance, parking where she could observe, but not be seen. Through the binoculars, she watched Christopher exit the SUV along with 4 men all wearing dark suits, all moving with the practiced awareness of people who'd grown up expecting violence. They approached the warehouse entrance. One of the men tested the door, found it unlocked, and they disappeared inside. Sabrina waited, counting seconds, her father's voice in her head. In an ambush, the first 30 seconds determine everything. 15 seconds. 20. 25. Then she saw a reflection in one of the upper windows, the brief glint of metal catching ambient light. Sniper. Her body moved before her mind finished processing. She was out of the car, sprinting toward the warehouse, her phone already dialing Christopher's number. It rang once, twice. Gunfire erupted. Not the sharp crack of a precision rifle, but the rapid staccato of automatic weapons. The warehouse's windows lit up with muzzle flashes. Sabrina ran harder, her heart pounding, all the tactical training she'd tried to bury flooding back. She reached the cut fence, slipped through, pressed herself against the warehouse's exterior wall. More gunfire. Shouting. The sound of something heavy crashing. The side door was ajar. Sabrina pulled it open and entered darkness. Her eyes adjusted quickly. She was in a corridor lined with empty offices, windows overlooking the main warehouse floor. Through the glass, she could see chaos. Christopher and his men had taken cover behind industrial equipment, while bullets tore through the air from multiple positions. They were pinned down, caught in crossfire. Sabrina scanned the space, her mind automatically analyzing angles and positions. 3 shooters on the ground floor. The sniper was still above. She could track his position by following the angle of incoming rounds. She needed a weapon. One of Christopher's men, young, maybe 25, lay motionless near an overturned barrel. Sabrina's stomach clenched, but she forced herself to focus. She moved low and fast, reaching the body, still breathing, unconscious, bleeding from his shoulder, but alive. His pistol lay 3 feet away. Sabrina grabbed it, checked the magazine 11 rounds and chambered one. The weight in her hand was familiar, comfortable. How many hours had she spent on the range with her father, learning to shoot until it became instinct? She heard footsteps above her, the sniper repositioning. Sabrina found the stairs, took them 2 at a time, controlled breathing, keeping her heart rate steady. 2nd floor. 3rd. The footsteps were closer now, moving toward the broken windows overlooking the warehouse floor. She reached the 4th floor and saw him, a man in tactical gear, rifle trained downward, completely focused on the targets below. He hadn't heard her approach. "Drop it," Sabrina said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The sniper spun, faster than she expected, bringing the rifle around. She fired twice. Center mass. The way her father taught her, the sniper dropped. Sabrina didn't wait to confirm the kill. She ran to the broken window, assessed the situation below. Christopher was behind a concrete pillar, bleeding from his upper arm. 2 of his men were providing covering fire while the 3rd dragged the unconscious one toward an exit. The 3 ground-level shooters were advancing, sensing victory. Sabrina picked up the fallen rifle, checked the scope, and made her choice. She'd told herself she'd left this life behind, that she'd never use these skills again. But watching Christopher, the man who'd given her the means to save her mother, who'd trusted her with his vulnerabilities about to be executed, changed everything. She sighted through the scope, exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger. The first shooter went down, the other 2 scattered, looking for the new threat. Sabrina sighted again, fired. The 2nd shooter fell. The 3rd one ran, abandoning the ambush, disappearing through a far door. Silence fell over the warehouse, broken only by the sound of rain on metal. Sabrina lowered the rifle, her hands steady, her mind clear. She'd crossed the final line. There was no going back now. She descended the stairs and walked onto the warehouse floor. Christopher was struggling to his feet, his left arm pressed against his side where blood seeped through his white shirt. He saw her approaching with the rifle and stopped moving, his expression unreadable. "You weren't supposed to be here," he said. "I know. You saved my life. I know." They stared at each other across the debris-strewn floor, sirens beginning to wail in the distance. Sabrina felt the weight of what she'd just done settling onto her shoulders, not guilt exactly, but the knowledge that she'd become someone different than she'd been an hour ago. Christopher crossed the space between them, ignoring his wound, and looked at her with something she'd never seen in his eyes before. "Who are you?" he asked for the 2nd time since they'd met. This time, Sabrina had an answer. "Someone who doesn't run anymore," she said. The safe house was in a neighborhood Sabrina didn't recognize, narrow streets, lined with brick row houses, far from Christopher's usual territory. He'd given terse directions to his remaining men, sent the wounded to a private doctor he trusted, and dismissed everyone except her. Now they were alone. The house's interior was sparse but clean, a living room with worn furniture, a kitchen that looked unused, stairs leading to a 2nd floor. Christopher moved to the bathroom without a word, leaving a trail of blood drops on the hardwood. Sabrina followed, her training overriding everything else. She found him sitting on the edge of the bathtub, trying one-handed to remove his jacket. His white shirt was soaked red on the left side, his face pale but controlled. "Let me," she said. He didn't argue. She helped him out of the jacket, then carefully peeled away the shirt. The wound was on his upper arm, a deep graze that had torn through muscle but missed the bone. Painful and bloody, but not life-threatening. "You need stitches," Sabrina said. "There's a medical kit under the sink." She found it professional grade, the kind that suggested this wasn't the first time this house had been used for emergency treatment. She pulled out gauze, antiseptic, a suture kit, and set everything on the counter with methodical precision. "This will hurt," she warned. "It already hurts." Christopher watched her prepare, his dark eyes tracking her movements. "Where did you learn field medicine?" "My father believed in comprehensive training." Sabrina soaked gauze with antiseptic. "If you can't get to a hospital, you need to keep yourself alive until you can." She began cleaning the wound. Christopher's jaw tightened, but he didn't make a sound. His tolerance for pain was remarkable or practiced. "You didn't hesitate," he said after a moment. "In the warehouse, you took that shot without hesitation." Sabrina's hands paused briefly before continuing. No, most people would have frozen. Even trained people. Taking a life isn't— I know what it is. Her voice was sharper than she intended. She forced herself to breathe, to focus on the task. I know exactly what it is. Silence settled between them, broken only by the sound of rain against the windows and Christopher's controlled breathing as she worked. Your father? He said quietly. He wasn't just military, was he? He consulted on anti-terrorism operations, trained counterinsurgency forces in 3 countries. Sabrina threaded the needle with steady hands. He taught me that hesitation gets people killed. When you make the decision to act, you commit completely, and you made that decision tonight. Yes, she met his eyes. For you. Something shifted in Christopher's expression, surprise maybe, or something deeper that he quickly concealed. Why? It was a good question. Sabrina had been asking herself the same thing since she'd pulled the trigger. Why risk everything for a man she barely knew? Why cross the line she'd sworn never to cross again? Because you were right, she said, focusing on placing the first stitch. About me never being out of this world. About my skills carrying responsibility. And because— she paused, choosing her words carefully. Because you gave me the means to save my mother without asking for anything in return. That matters. So this was debt repayment. No, another stitch. This was choice. Christopher was quiet while she worked, but she could feel his attention on her like physical weight. She finished the suture's 8 neat stitches that would leave a scar but would heal clean, and began bandaging the wound. I had them wrong, Christopher said suddenly. I thought Julian was the traitor because the evidence pointed to him so clearly. But you saw what I couldn't. You were too close. Betrayal by your best friend made emotional sense, so you accepted evidence that confirmed your fear. Sabrina secured the bandage with medical tape. That's why you needed outside eyes. I need more than that. Christopher caught her wrist gently as she finished, stopping her from pulling away. His hand was warm despite the blood loss, his grip careful but firm. Tonight proved that. You didn't just analyze the threat, you eliminated it. You think tactically under pressure. You don't panic. What are you asking? Stay. Not as a consultant, as a partner. His dark eyes were intense, sincere. Help me rebuild what's been compromised. Use your training to restructure my security, my operations. I'll pay you more than you'd make in 10 years at that bar. Sabrina looked down at his hand on her wrist, at the tattoos that disappeared under the bandage she'd just applied, at the blood still staining his skin. 6 days ago, she'd been pouring drinks and avoiding her past. Now she was stitching gunshot wounds and contemplating a partnership with a crime lord. I don't know if I can be what you need, she said quietly. You already are. Tonight was instinct. Survival. That's different from choosing this life deliberately. Christopher released her wrist but didn't look away. Then don't choose the life. Choose what we're building. You saw my files, the legitimate businesses, the families depending on stable territory. I'm trying to create something sustainable, something that protects more people than it hurts. But I can't do that alone. Not anymore. Sabrina cleaned the blood from her hands, buying time to think. Everything her father had taught her about tactical operations, about using force to protect the vulnerable. Christopher was offering her a chance to apply those principles, not in some distant war zone, but here, in the city where she'd tried to hide. Diego Torres, she said, changing the subject. We still don't know who he was working for. Whoever planned that ambush escaped. I know. Christopher stood carefully, testing his injured arm. Which means they'll try again. Different approach, but they'll try. Unless we find them first. We? Sabrina realized she'd done it again, spoken as if the decision was already made. Maybe it was. Maybe it had been made the moment she'd picked up that rifle. I need access to Torres, she said. I need to question him before whoever's behind this decides he's a liability. Christopher studied her for a long moment, something like hope flickering across his features. He's being held at a property in the industrial district. I was going to handle it myself, but— he gestured at his bandaged arm. But now you're injured, and I'm the one who's combat ready. Sabrina felt a dark humor in the reversal. How good is the security on this property? Excellent. And the men watching him are people I'd trust with my life. After tonight, I'd suggest reevaluating who you trust. Present company excluded? Sabrina met his eyes. I killed for you tonight, Mr. Santiago. That's not something I do casually. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, It came out like a promise. Christopher smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less dangerous. Christopher, if we're going to be partners, you should use my first name. We haven't established that we're partners, haven't we? He moved toward the door, favoring his injured side. You're planning to interrogate my prisoner. You're thinking 3 steps ahead about security vulnerabilities. You're already committed, Sabrina. You just haven't admitted it yet. He was right, and they both knew it. One condition? Sabrina said as they descended the stairs. Name it. No more secrets. If we're doing this, I need complete transparency. Every operation, every risk, every decision that could affect innocent people. I won't be a weapon you point at problems. I'm a strategist, or I'm nothing. Christopher turned to face her, extending his uninjured hand. Complete transparency. You have my word. Sabrina shook his hand, sealing an agreement she still wasn't sure she fully understood. But she felt something she hadn't felt in years: purpose. The sense that her skills weren't just tools gathering dust, but instruments being used to build something. Tomorrow we question Torres, Christopher said. Tonight, you should rest. There's a bedroom upstairs. What about you? I'll be fine on the couch. He paused at the base of the stairs. Sabrina? Thank you. For tonight. For all of it. She nodded, unable to find words that matched what she was feeling. Instead, she climbed the stairs to the small bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands were steady. No tremor, no delayed shock. She'd killed 2 people tonight and felt no guilt, only the calm certainty that she'd made the right choice. Her father's voice whispered in her memory. Skills are tools. They're not good or evil. That's determined by what you build with them. She was building something now. She just hoped she could live with whatever it became. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the blood from the city streets. But some stains, Sabrina knew, went deeper than water could reach. Diego Torres looked smaller than his file photo suggested. He sat in a metal chair in the center of a windowless room, hands zip-tied behind his back, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept since Christopher's men had picked him up. The room was in a building Sabrina didn't recognize: bare concrete walls, a single door, soundproofing that turned the space into a vacuum. Christopher stood against the far wall, his injured arm in a sling beneath his jacket. 2 of his men flanked the door, silent, imposing, ready. But it was Sabrina who pulled up a chair and sat directly in front of Torres. Diego, she said calmly, I'm going to ask you questions. How painful this gets depends entirely on your answers. Torres's eyes darted to Christopher, then back to her. I don't know who you are. I'm the person who killed the men you sent to ambush us. I'm also the person who found every piece of evidence proving you've been selling information for the past 4 months. Sabrina pulled out her phone, showing him screenshots of financial transactions. $40,000 wired through 3 shell companies. Want to tell me who paid you? I don't. Wrong answer. Sabrina's voice didn't rise, but something in her tone made Torres flinch. Let me explain your situation. Christopher Santiago is the civilized option. The people who paid you? When they realize you failed and got caught, they'll eliminate the loose end, which means your wife Isabella and your 3 children become leverage. Do you understand? Torres's face went pale. You wouldn't. I wouldn't, but they would. Sabrina leaned forward. Right now, your family is safe because Christopher has people watching them, but if you don't cooperate, he pulls that protection. And whoever comes for you will come for them too. It was a calculated cruelty, using a man's love for his family as a weapon. Sabrina felt the darkness of it, but she also felt the necessity. Time was running out. His name is Konstantin Petrov, Torres said, his voice breaking. He approached me 6 months ago, said he was expanding operations, wanted intelligence on Santiago's movements. Offered money I couldn't refuse. Christopher pushed off the wall. Petrov, Russian mob. He said it was just business intelligence. I didn't know they'd, Torres's words caught. I didn't know they'd try to kill you. But you kept feeding them information after the first attack, Sabrina said. After you knew what they were using it for. Torres looked at the floor. They said if I stopped, my family would pay. I was trapped. Sabrina exchanged a glance with Christopher. It was plausible the Russians were known for coercion tactics. But it didn't matter. Torres had made his choice, and people had died because of it. Where can we find Petrov? Christopher asked. He moves around, different locations, but he has a standing meeting every Friday at the Starlight Club on the east side. Private room in the back. Christopher checked his watch. Today's Friday. Sabrina stood, her mind already working through tactical options. The Starlight Club was Russian territory. Walking in there would be suicide without overwhelming force. How many men does he keep with him? She asked Torres. 4 or 5. Ex-military types. Armed. Security at the club? 2 at the front, 1 at the back entrance. Cameras throughout. Christopher moved closer to Torres, his expression hard. You're going to call Petrov. Tell him you have urgent information that Santiago is planning something big tonight, and you have the details. Request a face-to-face meeting at the club. He'll know something's wrong. He always calls me, I don't call him. Then make it convincing, Sabrina said coldly. Because if this doesn't work, I'm going to stop protecting your family and let nature take its course. It took 20 minutes to set up the call. Torres's hands shook as he dialed, but his voice steadied when Petrov answered. He delivered the lie smoothly. Santiago was consolidating his operations, moving high-value assets. Torres had intercepted the plans. Petrov bit. 9 p.m. at the Starlight Club. After the call ended, Christopher nodded to his men. Take him to the secondary location. Keep him comfortable, but isolated. As Torres was let out, Sabrina turned to Christopher. This is a trap within a trap. Petrov won't come alone, and he'll have the home field advantage. I know. But he also won't expect us to walk through the front door. Christopher's eyes held a dangerous gleam. We need leverage. Something that makes him talk instead of shoot. Like what? Like proof that his operation is already compromised. That we know everything. Christopher pulled out his phone, scrolling through files. I have contacts in the police department. Petrov has been running a protection racket disguised as security consulting. If we get documented evidence to the right people, he faces federal charges. Mutually assured destruction, Sabrina said. We can expose him, so he negotiates instead of fights. Exactly, but we need that evidence tonight, before the meeting. Sabrina's mind raced through possibilities. His business records would be at his office. But breaking in? Not breaking in, walking in. Christopher smiled grimly. Petrov's legitimate front company uses the same accounting firm I do, and I happen to know their security protocols. 2 hours later, Sabrina found herself in business attire borrowed from Christopher's assistant, carrying a briefcase and walking into the offices of Petrov's import-export company. Christopher had called ahead, claiming to be a potential business partner requesting preliminary financial documents. The receptionist, eager to please, had pulled the files. Sabrina photographed everything: shell company structures, payments to city officials, documentation of protection rackets dressed up as consulting fees, 40 minutes of work that would bury Petrov if it reached the wrong hands. By 8 p.m., they were in a car 2 blocks from the Starlight Club. Christopher wore a wire. Sabrina had a pistol concealed under her jacket and a knife strapped to her ankle. 4 of Christopher's most trusted men were positioned around the building. Last chance to walk away, Christopher said quietly. Sabrina checked her weapon. I stopped walking away the night you first came into my bar. That was less than 2 weeks ago. Feels like longer. Christopher studied her face. After tonight, there's no going back. You'll be in this world completely. Every enemy I have becomes yours. Then we'd better make sure we don't leave any enemies standing. At 8:55 p.m., they entered the Starlight Club. The music was loud, the lighting red and dim. The security at the door recognized Christopher immediately. Tension rippled through their posture, but they didn't move to stop him. Christopher walked to the bar and spoke to the manager. Tell Petrov that Christopher Santiago is here, and he'll want to take this meeting. The manager's face went white, but he made a call. 5 minutes later, they were led to a private room in the back. Konstantin Petrov sat at a round table, flanked by 4 men who looked exactly like Torres had described: military bearing, barely concealed weapons. Petrov himself was in his 50s, silver hair, expensive suit, eyes like ice. Mr. Santiago, he said in accented English, this is unexpected. Christopher sat across from him. Sabrina remained standing, positioned where she could see everyone. You've been testing my territory, Christopher said calmly. Using my own man to feed you information. Tonight, that ends. Petrov smiled. Bold of you to come here. You realize you're surrounded? And you realize that the documents I'm holding— Christopher placed a manila envelope on the table— contain everything the FBI would need to dismantle your entire operation? financial records, names, payoffs to city officials, all ready to be delivered if anything happens to me. The smile faded from Petrov's face. So here's what's going to happen, Christopher continued. You withdraw from this city, take your operations elsewhere. In exchange, these documents stay sealed. And if I refuse? Sabrina spoke for the first time. Then we burn you down. Your businesses, your connections, everything. And when the smoke clears, we'll still be standing. Petrov's eyes shifted to her, reassessing. And who are you? The person who killed your ambush team, she said flatly. The room went silent. Petrov's men tensed. 1 week, Christopher said. Wrap up your operations and leave. Or the documents go public and we solve this the old way. Petrov stared at him for a long moment, then threw back his head and laughed. Petrov's laughter died as quickly as it started. You think I'm afraid of papers? He leaned forward, his smile cold. You think the FBI scares me? I've been investigated before. Nothing sticks. This will, Christopher said. Because this time, I'm personally ensuring it reaches someone who can't be bought. Threats, Petrov waved dismissively. You come into my territory and make threats. Perhaps you've forgotten where you are. His men shifted, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Sabrina's body coiled, ready. She calculated distances, angles, who would draw first. 4 of them, 2 of her and Christopher. Bad odds, but manageable if she moved fast enough. Then Christopher did something unexpected. He laughed. You're right, Constantine. I did forget where I am. He stood slowly, buttoning his jacket with his good hand. I forgot that you're a dinosaur, that while you've been playing the same games for 30 years, the world has moved on. You think muscle and fear still rule this city? They don't. Information does, strategy does, and right now, I have both. Big words from a man in a room with 5 guns pointed at him. 6 guns, Christopher corrected. You're forgetting yours. But here's what you're forgetting, my people outside this building, the calls I've already made, the fact that every word spoken in this room is being recorded and transmitted in real time. Petrov's expression flickered just for a moment, but enough. You're bluffing. Am I? Christopher pulled out his phone, turned it so Petrov could see the screen. A live waveform showed audio being captured and transmitted. Waved to the camera. Sabrina saw the shift happen in Petrov's eyes, the realization that he'd been outmaneuvered. That violence now meant creating evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. That Christopher had turned this meeting into a trap. What do you want? Petrov asked, his voice flat. I already told you. Withdraw from this city. 1 week. End my existing operations? Win them down. Sell them off. I don't care. Just be gone. Petrov was silent for a long moment, his mind clearly working through options. Finally, he nodded slowly. 3 weeks. I need time to relocate assets. 2 weeks, and you pull your protection off Diego Torres's family. They're under my watch now. Agreed. Petrov stood, straightening his suit. But understand this, Santiago, you've made an enemy today. Maybe not in this city, but elsewhere. Men like me have long memories. So do I, Christopher said quietly. Which is why if anything happens to me, those documents don't just go to the FBI. They go to every organization you've ever wronged. Every family you've extorted. Every rival who'd love to see you vulnerable. Mutually assured destruction works both ways. Petrov's jaw tightened, but he extended his hand. 2 weeks. Then this city is yours. Christopher shook it. Pleasure doing business. As they walked out of the Starlight Club, Sabrina felt the adrenaline still coursing through her system. They'd been seconds away from a bloodbath, and Christopher had talked their way out of it. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. Christopher's men materialized from the shadows, forming a protective circle as they walked to the car. That was reckless, Sabrina said once they were moving. That was necessary. Christopher winced as the car hit a pothole, jarring his injured arm. Petrov respects strength, but he respects intelligence more. Shooting our way out would have started a war. This way, we won. Did we? He'll retaliate eventually. Eventually isn't now. And by the time he's ready, we'll be stronger. Christopher looked at her. Because we'll have had time to rebuild, to fix the vulnerabilities he exploited. Sabrina understood what he was really saying. They'd bought time. Time to restructure his organization with her help. Time to implement the security protocols and strategic thinking that would make future attacks harder. I need to see your entire operation, she said. Every warehouse, every business, every person in a position of authority. I need to understand the full scope before I can protect it. You'll have complete access, starting tomorrow. And Julian Vega? Christopher's expression clouded. What about him? You owe him an apology. He was loyal, and you suspected him because someone planted evidence. That damages trust. I know. Christopher's voice was heavy with regret. I'll talk to him. Explain everything. He'll understand. Will he? Christopher didn't answer. They drove in silence for several minutes before Christopher spoke again. Tonight, when Petrov's men reached for their weapons, you were ready to fight. I saw it in your stance. Of course I was ready. You would have died protecting me. Sabrina looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. Yes. Why? We barely know each other. It was a fair question. Sabrina had been asking herself the same thing. Why had she committed so completely to a man she'd known for less than 2 weeks? Why did protecting him feel less like obligation and more like instinct? Because you're trying to be better than what you inherited, she said finally. Because you gave my mother a chance to live without asking for anything in return. Because when you look at me, you don't see a waitress or a weapon, you see a partner, an equal. She turned to meet his eyes. That's rare, worth protecting. Christopher held her gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Not romance, they weren't there yet. Might never be. But recognition. Understanding. The beginning of trust, built in fire. I'm glad you stayed, he said quietly. So am I. The car pulled up to the safe house. As they exited, Christopher's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression hardening. What is it? Sabrina asked. Julian. He wants to meet. Says it's urgent. When? Now. Sabrina felt unease prickle her spine. That's convenient timing. Right after we dealt with Petrov. You think it's connected? I think we should be careful. She checked her weapon. Where does he want to meet? The original bar, where this all started. Sabrina nodded slowly. Full circle. Then let's finish this. The bar looked different at midnight. Emptier, quieter. The neon signs casting their familiar glow across rain-slicked windows. Sabrina walked in first. Christopher 3 steps behind, both of them alert. Julian Vega sat in the back booth, Christopher's usual spot. He was younger than Sabrina expected, maybe 30, with the kind of face that smiled easily, but wasn't smiling now. When he saw Christopher, he stood. Surprised you came, Julian said. You said it was urgent. Christopher stayed near the door. What do you want? To understand why you suspected me, why you had someone, his eyes shifted to Sabrina, investigating me like a criminal. Julian. 12 years, Christopher. We built this together, and the first time something goes wrong, you assumed I betrayed you. Pain edged Julian's voice. Do you know what that feels like? Christopher moved closer, his expression tight with guilt. I was wrong. The evidence was planted to make me suspect you, to divide us. I should have trusted my instinct instead of the data. But you didn't. No, I didn't. Christopher's voice dropped. And I'm sorry. Truly sorry. You've earned better than suspicion. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then his shoulders sagged. Torres. It was Diego, wasn't it? Yes. I should have seen it. He was always asking questions, always wanting details about operations. Julian shook his head. I'm the one who should apologize. This happened on my watch. It happened because someone very smart exploited our systems, Sabrina interjected. Torres was a vector, not the disease. The real threat was Konstantin Petrov. Was? He's withdrawing from the city, Christopher explained. 2 weeks, and his operations are gone. Julian's eyebrows rose. How did you manage that? Leverage, strategy. And, Christopher glanced at Sabrina, a partner who thinks 3 steps ahead. Julian studied Sabrina with open curiosity. You're the waitress who disarmed a robber. The one who figured out it was Torres. Among other things, Sabrina said. She's also the reason I'm still alive, Christopher added. The warehouse ambush would have succeeded without her. Julian extended his hand to Sabrina. Then I owe you thanks. Christopher's more than my business partner, he's family. Sabrina shook his hand, feeling the genuine warmth. This was what loyalty looked like, not blind obedience, but honest connection. The kind of bond Christopher had suspected and damaged but not destroyed. So what now? Julian asked Christopher. We rebuild? We rebuild better, stronger, with protocols that make another Torres impossible. Christopher pulled out a chair, finally relaxing. Sabrina's going to help restructure our security, implement new systems, As a consultant? As a partner, Christopher corrected. Julian looked between them, understanding dawning. You're really doing this? Leaving the bar life? Sabrina sat down across from him. I already left it, the moment I picked up that rifle. They talked for an hour about restructuring, about territory, about the careful balance Christopher was trying to maintain between protection and predation. Julian was smart, strategic, adding perspectives Sabrina hadn't considered. She understood why Christopher trusted him, why their friendship had survived even suspicion. Finally, Julian stood to leave. Welcome to the family, Sabrina. For what it's worth, I think you're exactly what we needed. After he left, Sabrina and Christopher sat in comfortable silence. The bar was closed now, just the two of them, and the neon lights painting everything in shades of red and blue. It started here, Christopher said. You, standing calm while a gun was in your face. Me, realizing you were something extraordinary. I was terrified, Sabrina admitted. You didn't show it. My father taught me that fear is information, not instruction. You feel it, process it, then act anyway. Smart man, he was. Sabrina looked at the spot where she'd disarmed the robber. Was it really only 2 weeks ago? He would have liked you, I think. He believed in using power responsibly, in protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Is that what you think I'm doing? I think you're trying. That's enough. Christopher stood, testing his injured arm. The pain medication was wearing off. She could tell. You should go home, get some rest. Tomorrow starts the real work. What about you? I'll sleep here, in the booth where I first saw you refuse to break. He smiled slightly. Seems fitting. Sabrina gathered her jacket but paused at the door. Christopher? Earlier, when Petrov's men reached for their weapons, you didn't flinch. You were ready to die rather than show fear. So were you. I know. That's what scares me. How quickly I became someone who'd kill to protect what I'm building here. With you. Having second thoughts? Sabrina looked back at him, this complicated man trying to transform violence into something resembling peace. Trying to be better than his inheritance. She thought about her mother, safe in her care facility because of his gift. About Tommy's bar, protected because Christopher valued neutral ground. About all the small businesses paying for protection that was real, not predatory. No, she said. Not second thoughts, just understanding what I've become. And what's that? Someone who doesn't run from who she is anymore. She smiled slightly. Someone who doesn't blink. Christopher raised his glass in a silent toast. Sabrina nodded and walked out into the rain. The city looked different now, not safer exactly, but clearer. She understood its rhythms, its threats, its opportunities. She'd stopped hiding from her training and started using it to build something that mattered. Her phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Your mother's care has been fully funded for the next year. All services approved. Thank you for your prompt payment. Sabrina stood in the rain, letting it wash over her, feeling the weight of choices made and accepted. She'd killed to protect what she was building. She'd partnered with a criminal to create something better than pure criminality. She'd become the person her father trained her to be, not a soldier, but a protector. The most dangerous person in the room wasn't the one holding the weapon. It was the one who understood fear and refused to show it. Sabrina Sales understood that now, and she would never blink again. Thanks for sticking with this story until the very end. You're the reason these stories feel alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to read your thoughts and connect with you in the comments.